I wanted to wait until after I'd slept on this announcement to record this thing. You know, really let my unconscious mind marinate on it. But my brain decided that it's not getting any sleep until after we do this. I haven't slept properly in weeks. It's a real problem. I think, before anything else, it is most important to, preface this discussion with the fact that most people on the planet don't care about this. Most people on the planet, I think most people who see these movies don't care about most of the things that get announced, if they care about anything. That's just like a baseline reality that I think many of us tend to lose sight of, and I think that is a very basic foundational thing that needs to be agreed upon so that we can avoid the kind of poisoned well that is online discussion of really any franchise, but especially the big ones. And what I mean by that is that I think we have to accept at the end of the day that these movies, Marvel movies, are made with the general audience in mind. This is the biggest franchise on the planet, and the way that you achieve that status is by making movies that are really for everyone, like for most people. And that means most people outside of the internet. People who are not frequenting SDCC, who are not in the stands at Hall H, who do not consciously consider themselves part of fandom. In the end, we gotta remember that that is the vast silent majority of viewers of these movies and shows and perceivers of these, announcements and this news. And for those people, I think their reaction to this announcement and what it means, the casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom, is going to be, oh, cool. And that's it. They'll probably forget that they heard that news within an hour of having read it. And right now, I really wish that I could be one of those people. But I can't. And most of you watching this video can't either, because we are consciously part of fandom. And that being the case, we are the group of people who are meant to have a reaction to this news, a really visceral, meaningful reaction that'll stick with us. The nuances and the intricacies of how fandom and sort of outside fandom interact, and the purpose of things like Hall H and SDCC and the online sphere and all this discourse that's generated for the longevity of certain projects and how they're anticipated and all that stuff is something that could be its own whole several hours long video. But my purpose here is just to begin by establishing that most people in the world don't care about this news to the degree that I do. I am in the group of people, like most of you, who are meant to feel a very specific way about this. And the specific way that I feel about this casting is deflation. So, why? Well, two main reasons. One is that this feels very concretely to me like Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios admitting defeat. I don't like that. And you can make the argument that they've kind of done this tacitly before. I think it's really unfortunate that this news is coming right on the heels of Deadpool and Wolverine releasing. That is exactly the wrong movie to have in theaters if you want a charitable read of this casting choice from your fan base, I think. Because Deadpool and Wolverine is a movie that explicitly comes out and says the MCU is kind of in a low point right now. And throughout that movie, I think it is very implicitly kind of filleting the Infinity Saga while it disparages everything that's come since. and as a couple of jokes in a Deadpool movie that's a little bit obnoxious and slightly disheartening, but really nothing to be taken remotely seriously, I don't think. The context of being jokes told by Deadpool kind of softens those statements. But to then do this, and to bring the previous face of the franchise who had comfortably been given a definitive ending, and to bring him back as the big selling point for your next pair of Avengers movies, on top of also bringing back the Russo brothers to direct those movies, that feels loaded. Because if this had just been bringing the Russo brothers back, then my reaction would just be, it's not ideal, but it's fine. Like, those guys have proven that they can make really good Avengers movies. And, like, again, separating the majority of the planet from the online fandom, there are certain corners of fandom that don't care for the Russo brothers to varying degrees, or have understandably been disappointed with their post-Marvel projects. But to most people on the planet, you say, you got the guys who did the last two Avengers movies and Captain America Civil War back and Captain America Winter Soldier back, and they're like, yeah, awesome, great, perfect choice. And on that level, I'm fine with bringing those two back. But you bring those two back and then announce the RDJ thing? That feels like an extremely online pilled in the bad way, extremely fandom motivated in the bad way decision. I want to clarify also that this is not a matter of me thinking that bringing Robert Downey Jr. back, like, ruins the ending of Endgame. Like, that's not my concern here. If he had been brought back in the capacity of 616 Tony Stark, or if he was being brought back in a capacity to, like, fill the Tony Stark role again, then I think that that would definitely, ruin, devalue Endgame. But, like, Endgame being sacrileged, or whatever the verb is not remotely on my list of issues here. That's not why I have a problem with this casting. For a long time, anyone who's followed me on Marvel stuff knows that I have been a staunch defender of Phase 4 and Phase 5, and I felt like Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios as a whole has, mostly needed to display a sense of confidence in their projects, and really needed to display strength, and that what's best for the franchise is to ignore most of the disparaging sort of perception that has, been hitting Phase 4 and 5. Because they've had a lot of successes that have gone underneath a lot of discussion. They've had a very fair share of, they've had a very fair share of extenuating circumstances that I think they could definitely rely on as, like, reasoning for why their movies haven't maybe done as well as they did in 2018, 2019. Nobody's movies have done as well as 2018, 2019 until very, very recently. And my biggest reservation with bringing Robert Downey Jr. in as Dr. Doom is that it reads like waving the white flag. It reads like an extreme lack of confidence in the past couple of years of projects, and I do not think that that is what the studio or the universe needs to be projecting. Because we did not need this. I don't think on any level did anyone anywhere need Robert Downey Jr. as Victor Von Doom. And it's just an unnecessary desperation move. It's an unnecessary admission of defeat. And that is the main level on which I dislike it. The secondary level on which I dislike it, and this I think is debatably more meaningful, is, I'm sorry guys, I'm one of the people who thinks that if you're gonna cast a Victor Von Doom in 2024, you should have cast a Romani actor. I know that there's really good Romani actors who could do this role out there, guys. Can I name them off the top of my head? No, but I'm not an agent. I'm not a casting director. I'm not a studio head. That's for those guys to do, and like it's 2024, guys. I don't think that casting a really big A-list white guy as Doctor Doom reads quite the same as it would have back in the day. Like, again, this is definitely one of those things where most people on the planet are not gonna care. But this is a level on which I care because it just feels kinda icky. Like, I feel like the landscape has changed, and I feel like fandom has grown even in just the 10 years since we cast Elizabeth Olsen as the Scarlet Witch back in 2014. Like, there were some people protesting that even then, but for the most part we let it slide because this wasn't really an issue that we were worried about so much. But I think about a lot of big franchises, and especially, unfortunately, how race as an issue has been tackled in a lot of Marvel projects, and I think that this is an unfortunate, apotheosis of a bad habit of lightening up characters and casting them with white people when it's really not necessary, and to me just feels kind of gross. And again, I know that for some people, a lot of people, in fact, that's not an issue, that's immaterial, it's not something that they're worried about, but it's something that bothers me about this choice. So, the reason that I wanted to sleep on this is because I wanted to approach it with a little bit more of a measured response and not just come at it purely from the knee-jerk feeling of extreme disappointment and kind of bewilderment that I have at this casting decision, this creative decision. Obviously I'm not quite doing that, but there is more measured perspectives to be taken into account, and there are ways that this could work. And I feel like they're kind of long shots, or at the very least they're unnecessary risks, but there are ways to spin this. So something that I think is important to remember, and something that I got reminded of by a channel that I actually really love, one of my favorite YouTube channels, is Cosmonaut Variety Hour. I was looking at his Twitter, and it did help at least bring me down to a sort of more grounded perspective on this, which is that, we won't know about the movie until we see the movie. This casting decision is just one part, albeit a major part, of a movie that doesn't actually exist yet, and we won't know what that means for the quality of the film as a film until we're sat in the theater watching it. And we won't be seeing it for, at minimum, another 2 years. I'm personally assuming that these projects, both Avengers movies, are probably going to get pushed back even more, but minimum 2 years we will be in the theater seeing this movie, and only then will we actually be able to judge, maybe Robert Downey Jr. gives such a good performance as Victor Von Doom that it completely sucks me into the movie and sucks me into every scene that he's in, and all of my complaints just go away and they're out of my head as I'm watching the film. That is the best case scenario here, and it is entirely possible. And that is something to keep in mind with this or any casting decision, or any creative decision with any movie at all. It's just, you're not gonna know how it's gonna feel in the movie until you're seeing the movie. That said, I don't think my complaint is coming from a place of this will make the next 2 Avengers movies worse movies. I think my complaint is coming from a place of I don't care for this on principle. So, on principle, there are maybe some potentially far-fetched ways that we can make this more palatable. One of those ways, maybe this is a fake out. Maybe this is a Doom bot that just happens to look like Robert Downey Jr. Maybe this is a disguise of some kind. Maybe we're gonna get to Avengers Doomsday or Avengers Secret Wars, and we're gonna find out that this is some magic thing, or that there's Dr. Doom who's played by a different actor, and this was all a ruse, and this was all Kevin Feige playing 4D chess, which normally would sound ridiculous, but it is something that he, likes to do. This is Kevin Feige, who has recently admitted to sowing fake rumors and fake leaks by like hiring people to do that in the online sphere. This is the Marvel Studios that cut several characters out of certain shots in the trailers for Infinity War and Endgame. They like to do this. They like to play 4D chess with their audience. They like to really mess around with the online fandom and their expectations. It's possible that this isn't even Doctor Doom-like for serious. Another way to spin it, and this is a lot more tenuous and probably not intentional, I think, but there is a meta level that I think almost works, where if we are going to go whole hog on the Fantastic Four, because it really seems like we're going to go whole hog on the Fantastic Four, and we're going to have Oscar Isaac as Reed Richards kind of usurp the previous position that Robert Downey Jr. held as like the face of the franchise, like Reed Richards as the genius at the center of the MCU. If that's what we're going to do, and we're going to try and pull that off within the next 2-3 years, good luck. But if that's the plan, then I can kind of see almost like a Pokemon or like Devil May Cry kind of metagame here, where it's pitting the new protagonist of the franchise against the old. Where, like, you know, people in my age range, slightly older, you play the Generation 2 Pokemon games, or the remakes of those maybe, and like your big post-game reveal is like, oh snap, it's the player character from the last game, and you have to face him, and that's like your ultimate challenge. I wouldn't be surprised if on some level that's the thinking here. Is like, yeah, bring Robert Downey Jr. back as the bad guy, and that's your ultimate meta commentary. And if it plays out in that way, it could be the ultimate refutation to all of the worries that I'm having. And, you know, whether or not it's read the way that it's meant to be read is its own whole thing. Again, we'll have to see when the movie comes out. But if that's the intent, then it could be gangbusters. It could be a very deliberate statement of the new MCU does not need to kowtow to the old MCU. And we're going to prove that by having our new guys whip our old guy. And you know, I'm glad that I at least took the time to think out that prospect as, you know, I'm recording this as I was preparing to sit down for this video, because if anything, I think that is the idea that gives me the most potential comfort, and which leaves me ending this video on a maybe more hopeful note than I came into it with. Because the more that I talk out that sort of like meta text, the more it definitely does sound like a Kevin Feige move. The more that it definitely does seem like it's operating on the same kind of thematic principle that Infinity War and Endgame operated under, where Infinity War especially was about thematically playing with audiences' expectations for how MCU stories work and defying those expectations. And here, if the idea is that we are defying the face of the Infinity Saga, then I'm here for that. But again, I feel like that's maybe kind of a long shot. You know, I have some friends who are long-time MCU fans who slowly have been getting more and more disillusioned with it, and who, for them, this decision was the straw that broke the camel's back and they're done. It was between this and Deadpool and Wolverine, for some of them. That was never a danger of happening with me. Like, am I done with the MCU? No, duh. My love for this franchise runs deep in my bones, and even a ludicrous, on its face decision like this one was not going to dissuage that. Even if I hadn't kind of just talked myself out of my initial doom spiral for the most part. Kind of, sort of have. But you know, the unfortunate thing, even if the more hopeful side of me that now exists is correct, is that it's going to be 2 years, and it's going to be 2 years of this decision and the anticipation and the dread of seeing how it plays out hanging over the head of this franchise like the sword of Damocles. Because, like, I didn't even get to talk about the other announcements because I had been following coverage of Comic-Con for the whole night, and I was interested. I am excited about what I'm hearing about Thunderbolts. I'm super excited for Fantastic Four. I'm one of the people who's very eager to see Captain America Brave New World. And that excitement is still there and will be there for whatever other future projects are coming. But for those projects, this lingering sense that maybe Marvel and Feige have given up and have acquiesced to a very entitled section of the fan base who does not share my excitement, that lingering feeling is going to be there. And it's not going to be resolved for another 2 years. And it's a really weird feeling to be stuck with, So where are you leaning? Are you leaning towards the more hopeful, maybe this is metagaming, maybe this is a rebuke of needing to adhere to the MCU's past side of things? Are you leaning towards the more, this is just nakedly giving up and nostalgia baiting and worshipping at the altar of the MCU's past? Is this your, like, I'm done with the MCU moment? Is it not? Are you worried about how the next 2 years are going to feel, or are you keen to just let everything sit as it is and judge this decision once we see it in context? I don't know where I'm at definitively, but who knows? Maybe you guys can talk me into a firm stance. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. That's it, man. I gotta go to sleep.